So we have a new list, not a completely full list. I think there's only 13. So we're going to do this list next week's list 8. We would typically have our second field trip, which is at South Coast Plaza. And a lot of the trees are there. Excuse me. What I'm going to suggest, if any of you ever are in that area, I'm just planting the seed now. There's a place called South Coast Village, which is across Sunflower, between on Sunflower, from the backside of South Coast Plaza. And there's a few trees on that list that are you can't really find them too many other places. So it's a good spot to look. I found some other places, but it's a good place to see 3 or 4 of those trees all in one area. So I'll mention it again next week. And then if you guys are interested, I can even give you some more information on where you might want to go if you want to see those trees. Okay. And then, of course, remember, we'll have a field trip in Claremont on November 20th, and then one in at the Huntington Library on December 4th. Okay. All right. Let's get started here. Okay, so Prosopis glandulosa maverick. So this is a drought tolerant tree, and it's a variety, and the variety is kind of chosen for its ability to live within irrigated areas and handle some of the things that get thrown at a tree that's kind of more of a drought tolerant tree that gets water regularly. Some of our drought tolerant plants tend to suffer a little bit when it comes to summer watering and things like that. So this one stands up pretty well to some of the watering schemes of regular Southern California ornamentals. So anyway, it gets about 30 feet tall and 30 feet wide. These trees are all throughout the deserts of Arizona, California, parts of Texas and Nevada, but this particular variety has kind of been selected and sold often in the nursery. They have very small compound leaves, and they have these kind of bottle brush like flowers on them that turn into pods that get about 2 to 6 inches long. And then sometimes they'll drop some of their leaves, but they go briefly deciduous. So here's the top and the bottom of the leaf, and here's the flower. Here you can see these Fabaceae pods. In the desert, these trees are real important part of the ecosystem for the desert animals that live there. They eat the pods. The leaf litter actually kind of holds onto water and allows other plants to hang out. They send out a pretty deep root system, along with a shallow root system that takes up water rapidly. So they do double duty. But in a cultivated situation, in a drought tolerant yard, they would be just fine. I saw one in a lawn the other day, believe it or not. So they have a pretty nice form, and Maverick, the variety, tends to hold the form pretty well. A little bit of pruning. We have one in a raised planter at OCC, and we just water it with a hose whenever we think about it. So it seems to do pretty well. We actually kind of shut down the irrigation system in that planter. Southwestern U.S., Texas, Mexico, 30 feet tall and wide. Grown from cuttings, this variety is thornless, can handle desert conditions as well as regular watering. Compound leaves with tiny leaflets, 45 inches long. Flower inflorescence yields bean-like edible pods.
Are the pods edible to us as well, or just ants?
We could eat them, but I don't think there's a lot of recipes out there. I could be wrong, but I know that I took a desert ecology class, and there's all kinds of animals that rely on these pods as part of their regular nutrition uptake. So they're a big part of the desert ecosystem. They are edible. Yes. That's a question that I wish I should investigate a little bit more. I'm sure that they were probably consumed, I would imagine, a little bit by some of our Native American populations. And so I don't know about present day, if there's any, if they're being used regularly or not.
Rick,
Yes.
is it considered a multi-trunk tree?
It's usually branches from the base.
Uh-huh.
So, this one here, you can see, this is one that would probably get a little training in the nursery. It probably starts out as a kind of like the, Cercis occidentalis, the Western redbud, kind of like a bush form. And then that will just in turn turn into a multi-trunk tree. I haven't seen them too often as standards, but I know they do grow them as standards as well. Okay, so Pinus mugo, both mugo means small, and so this is the smaller of the two mugo pines. So this one is from the mountains of Central and Southern Europe. A lot of them in Switzerland, in the Alps. Usually 4 to 8 feet tall, which is pretty small, and twice as wide. So it usually ends up being twice as wide as it is tall. They're slow growing. So this tree that you're seeing here is in the horticulture department. I just pruned it about 3 weeks ago, and it hadn't been pruned for maybe 4 or 5 years prior to that. I pruned it the last time, but it's relatively slow growing. It sprawls along the ground, and it's kind of got a typical alpine way of growing. A lot of alpine plants, they're up high, hug close to the ground to retain heat and to resist cold winds. Now, I thought that ours was a little bit strange because it seemed to be almost kind of intentionally almost laying on the ground. And then I went to Europe in 2017 and went to Kew Gardens in outside of London and found the mugo pines there, and they were much older, but they were just running along the ground, kind of sprawling, just like this one is. So if you're thinking about something that's going to be conducive to our smaller landscapes and probably just do fine in a kind of a tight area and still give a kind of a nice green wispy look, this would be a good one for that. This one we have uplit, and that helps too. It's because it's got that twisty, sprawling trunk. Anyway, You can see the needles in the needle sheaths. I think there's 2 needles in a needle sheath. They're kind of a blue-green color. And you can see some of the male cones here, and this is a female cone developing here. And here you can see some older female cones. So not very big at all. And you can see the sprawling habit of this tree. Looking at it, you know, seeing this branch, it just goes way out here. Pretty sculptural. 4 to 8 feet tall and twice as wide. Green needles are up to 3 inches and held in groups of 2. Cones 1 to 2 inches and around its balls. Great performer, has a variable growth habit. Now, as far as the needles being 3 inches long, I don't think that any of ours are that long on our tree. And it's been there for 50 years. But probably about 2.5, maybe 2.5 inches long. But anyway, okay. Next on our list is Cedrus deodara. Another one that I remember misspelling as a student. I spelled it Deodora, D-O-R-A. And I remember everything I misspelled in school. Anyway, you're going to see more than one true cedar. Now, a true cedar has needles that come out in like a tuft, a grouping. There are other trees that they call cedars up in the Sierras that have a kind of a flat, kind of an arbor vitae-like leaf. It's kind of a flat, like coral, you know, it's very flat and wispy that way. This one has needles. It's a true cedar. We're going to have Cedrus atlantica and we're going to have Cedrus deodara. And those two have remarkable similar characteristics. What I want you to be able to do is always define the two from each other. So this one, it has at the ends of the branches what we have heard, at least I read this in Sunset, calling them nodding tips. So at the ends of the branches, the tips are kind of weeping down. The ends of the branches are just at the very ends weeping down. So when you see one of these next to a Cedrus atlantica, that would be the way you would tell them first apart. If you got a little bit closer, you would see that the needles of Cedrus deodara are about twice as long. So about 2.5 inches long on Cedrus deodara and about 1.5 inches long in Cedrus glauca. So here you can see the branch with the nodding tips here. And here you can see a little cone. And what's interesting about the true cedars is their cones kind of sit up like Easter eggs, standing up on tops of the branches. Here's a real old one. And you can see, you know, how dramatic they get. When we get up into Pasadena and we get into the Huntington Library and all kinds of areas where they have these big old Cedrus deodaras, you'll see how cool they are when they get to some size. They're native to the Himalayas. They're fast growing to 80 feet tall and 40 feet wide. Needles are in tufted clusters again. If they're never pruned, the lower branches actually sweep to the ground. Now, if you've ever been in the classroom in horticulture room 102, as you come in the door, there's some glass windows that kind of divide that classroom from the office. The blinds are always down, but I have all these pictures of past years of trees class, and we always find the same Cedrus deodara that was never pruned, and so that has branches that are touching the ground. And so the students are all up and around those lower branches for all of those group pictures. So it's kind of cool. Softer, lighter texture than the other cedars, and that's because the needles are longer and kind of more delicate. There's many varieties of this. It's deep rooted, and once it's established, drought tolerant. So these are ones that will, once they've been established over the first 5 years or so, can handle being left without any irrigation. So they prefer a deep watering once in a while, but they can handle it. So here you can see the needles and those cones sitting upright. Here you can see just the bark, kind of a gray bark, nothing really distinctive about the bark itself. This is one that I went to great lengths to find to take a picture of. And so if ever you guys go to Washington, D.C., I would recommend it to anybody, but Washington, D.C. has a long history of being a tree city, and they have all kinds of books of where their historical trees are. And this is at the top of the Arlington House, which overlooks the Arlington Cemetery, and so I made the big trek to find this tree and hunt it down. And it's a little bit squattier than the previous picture I showed you, but it has been there since the first days of the even before Arlington Cemetery was the Arlington Cemetery. So here are the needles and those little tufts, clusters, I guess you'd call them. And here are the male cones. And then this is a female cone. Now, when I was a student, this is how old I am. When I was a student, there was the movie with Jeff Goldblum called The Fly. You guys ever see that movie? So no, you should see it. It's Halloween time, and if I were to, recommend a movie for Halloween, go see Jeff Goldblum in The Fly. Anyways, he gets into this pod, and a fly gets in there with him, and so he exchanges the DNA with the fly, and it slowly turns into a fly. It's pretty wild. But anyway, this is exactly what his pod looks like, except there's a door in there. So just so you know. Now you have to see the movie because I said that. I wonder how many of you will. Okay. Okay, this is just so native to Himalayas and fast growing to 80 feet tall, 40 feet wide at ground level. Lower branches sweep down to the ground level. Graceful nodding tips identify the species from other true cedars in the skyline. Softer, lighter texture than other cedars. Needles 2 inches along are blue, green, or gray cast, and there's many different varieties of this. Okay, next on our list, Macadamia ternifolia. This is the macadamia nut. If you have had macadamia nuts, you understand why they're so treasured. They're a very rich nut. But anyway, the tree itself, we have one in the horticulture arboretum, and it has very leathery leaves that are very undulating at the edges, with spines towards the petiole. So if you look at this leathery leaf with the undulating edge, and as it gets close to the petiole that joins it to the stem, you see some little spines there. So it's pretty distinctive. The leaves are pretty distinctive, very leathery, stiff, and then undulating edges. And it's in the Proteaceae family, and everything in the Proteaceae family has a kind of a wild looking flower. And if you look closely at the flower, they're kind of, these are just little tubes here that stick out. And they kind of drape down like tassels. Those tassels can get pretty long. Of course, the they can eventually, when they're established, they produce a brown nut. And that's in December that we usually get the nuts. We haven't had any on our tree yet. This tree can handle acid or alkaline soil. It prefers well-drained soil or lighter soil, but you know, we don't really have much of that here where we are. And it can handle heat and humidity and wind as well. So here's the tree that we have in the department. It's twice the size as when I took these pictures now. And here you can see the undulating leaf next to the bark. It's a clean, handsome, ornamental tree where frosts are light, 30 to 40 feet tall, and almost as wide. Wavy margin leaves that are leathery and toothed towards the base, 4 to 6 inches long. Flowers come in winter and spring and are white pendant clusters up to a foot long. Smooth-shelled nuts come after 5 years. Ours has been there for 15 and we haven't had any nuts yet. But it's living in a pretty harsh environment out there. Okay. Syzygium paniculatum, the Australian brush cherry. This is from Australia. Most commonly, there's several trees on our list that tend to be more popular as tall hedges than they are as trees. Podocarpus gracilior is one of them. The Carolina laurel cherry is another one, and this is another one as well. You see these most often planted as a tall screen or as a column form plant from the nursery. It has little white flowers and then these fruits which are edible. But here you can see its natural planting. As a gardener, I had to deal with 2 or 3 huge, well-established hedges. One was 12 feet tall and 40 feet long, and I had to prune that like 4 times a year. So I became quite familiar with this as a hedge. New growth is really shiny and kind of a bronzy, shiny, reddish color. And it's very attractive. The small leaves lend it to hedging. As a tree, it's more upright and kind of columnar. Doesn't have a real good natural shape, so I'm sure that's probably why it's been, you know, used so much as a hedge. But here's the bark. And some people that have lived with this as a shrub or as a tree or as a hedge recognize that the leaves sometimes get these little bumps on them. They're called galls, and they're created by this little insect called a psyllid bug, Eugenia psyllid. And it chews on the bottom of the leaves and makes a kind of a little camp there when it's in its juvenile state. And that regular feeding causes the top of the leaf to bubble out and make a gall. If you flip them over, they're living in those little pockets. So it can be problematic. I know that I had to try to get rid of them in this pest when I was a gardener, and I remember the client was pretty adamant about me getting rid of it, and so I was spraying orthene, which is a pretty serious spray. It's a systemic, but you have to spray it on, and I wouldn't do that now, but I did back then. But here's what they say about taking care of this Eugenia psyllid. And the reason I'm bringing this up now in this trees class is I assume that some of you have run across this plant. What they say is that there is a kind of an ecosystem balance. There's actually a predator of this psyllid bug, and usually it's there. And they suggest what you do is after you prune it, to leave the prunings on the ground, and the the hatchlings from the predator will then go after the psyllid bugs. The only problem with that is that very rarely are you going to be able to talk a client into saying, hey, listen, I'm going to prune your hedge, but I'm just going to leave all the stuff on the ground. Just leave it there for a week or so, because you won't get too many people that would buy that, but it works. Anyway, this is the little psyllid bug. Here's the new growth. You can see it, little edible fruit in there. Here's the flower. It's kind of almost a whitish staminate flower. And I ate these as a kid, but before anybody said, hey, they're edible, by the way. How do you figure that out as a kid, I wonder? But anyway, I probably wasn't all that sharp as a kid. Here's what they are in look like in a tree form, kind of tall and columnar, much taller than they are wide. Sometimes their branches will start to kind of drape down. You know, they'll get up and they get kind of heavy and they kind of drape down. I see that a lot. Here's our specimens at OCC, trimmed into little cones by the stadium there. But at least we can always go find specimens from it. Okay. If unclipped, the brush cherry makes a single or multi-trunked upright tree 30 to 60 feet tall and 10 to 20 feet wide with a dense crown. When I was when I first started teaching in 2005, we had a beauty that was right outside the horticulture department. It has a dense crown, often grown as a column form and sheared into tall hedges, screens, and various shapes. Bronzy, shiny new growth, attractive and lush. Summer inconspicuous white flowers yield purplish fruits that are edible. Host-specific Eugenia psyllid causes a bumpy galling on the leaves. Okay. Phahoa sellowiana, sometimes called Acacia sellowiana. I don't know which one I have on your list. I think on the trees list, I have it as Phahoa sellowiana, and then on the shrubs, because this is one that is on the shrubs list as well, I have it as Acacia sellowiana. Either one works just fine. So this tree is a small scale tree, tends to 18 to 25 feet tall, about the same spread. It's got glossy, the leaves are kind of glossy green on the top and kind of a gray soft on the bottom. It's from Brazil, Paraguay, northern Argentina, and Colombia. Now the flowers are pretty special. So this is one I actually took on. I have one in my backyard that I planted, and I wanted to get the flowers just when they were at their perfect look. And these flower petals that you see here, the kind of the creamy pinkish petals, are edible. And when you get them when they're just right, you pop them off and put them on your tongue, and they almost kind of melt into your tongue. They have a sweet floral taste to them. They're good in salads, by the way, and then they have the staminate part of the flower that goes on to yield the pineapple guava fruit. Here are the leaves. They're kind of a dark green, obviously on the top, and then a really light, almost whitish on the bottom. Here's the fruit. It's about the size of an egg, 2 to 3 inches long. I think this is probably the best of the guavas. Now, I would have probably lots of people that would argue with me about that. But I like them because you can cut them lengthwise, and they're the perfect width for a teaspoon to get in there and scoop it out. And we make, our neighbors have one, and we have one, and we either make guava muffins or guava jelly preserves out of our guavas. We love it. So I think they taste great. Here you can see it as it's forming from the flower. We planted some along the side of horticulture there. They've grown up quite a bit since this planting was done. I like these because, you know, I like them because they have an ornamental quality. Their bark has got a really cool kind of a cinnamon color, and it's kind of crackly. It's very attractive. They can be formed into a really nice tree. I often would buy them in a bush form and then form them into a tree over time for my clients. I have to tell you a quick story, if you don't mind, about one of my clients. I planted one of these in their landscape and told them the whole story. That was always the big selling point, is, you know, oh, well, taste one of these flower petals, you know, and then they would all put the flower petal in their mouth and get really excited. And then anyways, they got to the point where these clients, which were friends of mine, and would you know, wait for those fruits and try to do something with them, you know. And I got a phone call from my friend, and she said, hey, listen, I hate to say this, because I did their landscape design, then did their installation, and then I was their gardener after that. I hate to say this, but your guys took all of my guavas when they were here. And I said, listen, I got to tell you, I don't think my guys would do that. She said, well, I went out there this morning and there were 18 of them. I counted them on the ground and they're gone. And I said, well, you know, something might have got to them. And she said, oh, I don't think so. I said, could be rats. Do you have any rats around? And she said, well, no, we don't have any rats. And so anyway, so the conversation was kind of left I felt bad. I ended up mentioning it to my guys, and of course they felt, you know, when you have to say, hey, you know, so-and-so thinks you took their fruit, then, you know, they get all hurt, you know, and I didn't blame them at all. But I just had to ask, and they said, no, we didn't take them. In fact, we didn't even see any fruit. And so anyway, so a couple weeks later, we were over there for our dinner club, having cocktails, sitting outside in their patio. And there was lighting up the tree, and we were sitting right by it. And anyway, I look up on the fence and see this king-size rat running along the top of the fence. And I went, hey, look, there's a rat. And everybody turned and looked and watched the rat, and we all got amazed at how fast it was moving. And then about, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes later, there came another one coming from another direction on the fence going the perpendicular, the other fence. So the tree was kind of in a corner. And so there was rats running along this fence top and the top of this other fence. So it was like there was like a freeway system. So every time a rat would run by, I would make a big deal out of it. And mostly so that she would realize that I was probably right about that. So if you have fruits, you have to pick them before the rats get them. That's just the way it is. Okay, sorry, but that's my story. Okay, a great shrub, hedge, or small scale tree, 18 to 25 feet tall and wide. Needs guidance to establish a well-shaped tree. Oval 2 to 3 inch leaves are dark green on top and whitish underneath, giving it a gray-green cast. Flowers are red staminate centered with creamy pinkish white petals that are edible and good in salads. Fruits are tasty and egg-shaped, 2 to 3 inches long, and not overabundant, so that you don't get too many. Late summer into fall. I'll have to, during the break, I'll go get my preserves and show you what they look like. Crackly cinnamon colored bark is attractive and good low voltage lighting subject. Okay. All right. So we're gonna have to rely on these pictures because our Michelia or Michelia, depending on how you say it, at OCC are now gone. I I planted 3 of them over by behind the faculty house in the lawn because they like water. And about a month later, one of them was mowed over by a lawnmower, and then now the other 2 have been taken out and replaced with something else. So anyway, Michelia doltsapa. This is the sweet Michelia or Michelia. So this is in the Magnoliaceae family, and one of the things that you look for with this tree is evidence of that relationship with a magnolia. It has long tropical leaves on it, and it has a magnolia-like white flower. Here it is, this white flower. And this is from one of the trees that, while it was still there, so kind of an homage to what was there. The other thing that I want you to see, though, is this long, what we would probably technically call a scar. So this is going to produce seeds in this long part of the flower. Now, the reason I bring all this, and here's another one here that's producing fruit. So this was the center of a flower before. The Magnoliaceae family is one of the oldest angiosperm families, and they produce a structure called a scar that is kind of harkens back to a cone. So the seeds are produced and kind of stick out on the outer perimeter of this scar, and the scar is formed in the middle of the flower. So they kind of have a halfway between a conifer and an angiosperm look to them. And that's something to kind of keep in mind, because you can usually always see these things left over after the flower petals have dropped. They smell great. They have a great fragrance. So here you can see the flower, and you can see this is going to be forming seeds along this scar here. You can see one here that is doing just that. And you can see one here, all the petals have fallen off right here. And then you can see that this is producing the scar. And then even later, you know, you can always see remnants of this. So it's long green leaves that are kind of got a little bit of a rusty fuzz on the bottom of them, kind of like magnolia leaves do. And here they are again. Now these are kind of open trees. They're not, they're kind of delicate. They need to be protected from harsh winds, Santa Anas, things like that. We put them on the south side of the wall of a building that had no windows, and thought it would be nice to just have them there. They also train these as an espalier because of their delicate and open form. So they can be grown as an espalier against the building. And the leaves almost look avocado-like. But when you flip them over, you see they sometimes have this brownish fuzz on them. Here's one kind of growing with these sprays. So you can see it's kind of got a real open habit to it. Probably could be benefit from being pruned a little bit as it's growing. So it can get up to 90 feet tall. It's native to the Himalayas. Normally only gets 25 feet tall in Southern California in as many years. So it's pretty slow growing. Leaves thin textured, dark green and leathery. Furry brown buds open to flowers from cream colored to white and slightly green tinged at the base. They are 5 to 7 inches across with 12 to 16 segments and are fragrant. Buy a tree with a desired form, then prune to shape. It needs water. It's known to be, you know, not able to go long periods of time without water. Okay. Another really cool tree, Stenocarpus sinuatus. This is the firewheel tree. We had one perfect specimen on campus that got taken out for the new student center there. So we've asked to have some more planted, but they're a really cool tree. They have a very unique leaf on it that can be lobed and have multiple lobes on the one individual leaf. But the most dramatic thing is their flower. The flower is just incredible. Again, Proteaceae family always has these really wild looking flowers. So this tree is from New Zealand, 25 to 30 feet tall. Here's the picture of a flower that I took of the one that we had before it got taken out. So you can see the real interesting looking, almost alien looking shape of the flower. When they're first developing, they're very concentric. And when I took the class, the teacher described them as looking like the Rotary Club logo. You know, as you're driving into towns, if you drive across country, if you drive anywhere and you start coming into small towns, a lot of them have a sign, welcome to Aurora or whatever it happens to be. And then they'll have the Rotary Club insignia. It looks a lot like this flower does. So it's got like these little spokes and little knobs at the end. So here's the tree. It was always reliable. You can always find blooms, and not always, but there were quite often blooms on it. Real pretty bark. Here's the leaf kind of undulating, and it's got lobes on it. This one only has 3 lobes, but on the first opening slide, there were probably 6 or 7 lobes on it. Here you can see again. That's a real tropical look to it. It's a good accent tree, a specimen accent tree. Would probably prefer it if you put it in a raised planter and gave it some good fertile soil and a well-drained soil. Something you could control, keep a little bit on the moist side. Can handle heat and aridity though once it's established, as long as it's got enough water. Doesn't make sense, does it? Heat and aridity, as long as it gets enough water. I guess what I'm saying is once it's established, it doesn't need to have regular water. Okay. It's just a drawing of the leaves and the flowers and the resulting pods, which we rarely see. Okay, New Zealand, Australia, 30 feet tall, 15 feet wide. Leaves deep green, up to 12 inches long, and deeply lobed and quite unique on young plants. Smaller and unlobed on older. So as they get older, you don't see this kind of real unique leaf shape. Extremely unique flowers are tubular shaped and spread out like spokes in a wheel, scarlet red. Flowers sometimes emerge on the trunk, right out of the side of the trunk. Prefers deep, rich, slightly acidic soil. Okay. Okay, so Cagelia africana is the sausage tree. Gets up to 60 feet tall, 30 to 40 feet wide. It's evergreen. When it goes through dry spells, though, it'll just drop some leaves off. So here you can see the tree with these long pods that look like sausages hanging in a butcher's window. Leaves have 6 to 10 leaflets on it, and they're very, very stiff and leathery. This is the one we have in the horticulture department. It has these little sausages on it, and here are the leaves. So this is 2, 4, 6, 7 leaflets.
Rick, I think I don't know. I'm just looking at the list, but I think we skipped. It might be not in order because.
Yeah, it's not in order.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's not in order. I'm sorry. In fact, I was shuffling my cards around and I didn't even think about it. I was just going with the PowerPoint. So this is actually number 102.
Okay, I just wanted to make.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, we'll get it together. So we jumped here a little bit. Sorry about that. So Cagelia africana, this is the sausage tree. So 102, we'll go back. Look at how gray and smooth the bark is, and you can almost sense how stiff and leathery these leaves are. The flowers are pretty special. They're in the Bignoniaceae family, which means they're trumpet shaped. So they hang down in these long pendants, and then the flowers tilt up and then open. Almost looks like somebody's singing. So here's that really stiff leaf. There's the bottom of the leaf with very pronounced veins. And I know this looks a little funny, but I had to put this picture because the ones that we have in the hort department are only like 4 inches long, but they can get quite pronounced, these sausages. And so I just thought I would show you what they could be. It's actually a woody berry. Can get 12 to 36 inches long.
Is that edible?
I don't think so. I don't think so. If it was, it would feed a lot of people. So excuse me for having these out of order. It's a drought deciduous tree. And so when I talk about the arboretum having, conditions that are challenging sometimes, ours throws off its leaves quite often. We probably don't water enough over there. Innately compound leaves, stiff and leathery with pronounced veination on the leaflets, pendulous flower clusters up to 10 feet long. Bear bronzy trumpet-shaped flowers. Namesake fruits are like sausages hanging in a butcher's window and can get over 4 feet long. So the flower pendants can get really long. The ones we have in ours are only like a foot long. So, okay, going back to the one after the firewheel tree, Catinus cogigrea. This is smoke tree. The smoke tree is a really rugged tree. This smoke is called the smoke tree because of these flowers, which are very, very fine texture, almost look like cotton candy on the tree. And then even when the flowers are finished, like they are on this tree, so the flowers are finished, but the little stems of the flowers or the whole inflorescence the stem is still hanging on there. Even that has that same kind of look, not quite as dramatic as this is, but you get the idea. So this form, when it's in full bloom, this will last about 3 weeks. So it's not something that you see all the time, but you do see the stems afterwards that last for quite a bit longer. The leaves are kind of an interesting color. They're kind of burgundy and have a little bit of a bluish green to them. And here you can see the old flower stalks here. Burgundy and a little bit of bluish to them, especially when they get a little bit older. And here you can see the kind of the color, the modeling of the burgundy with some of the blue green. And here's the underside of the leaves. And here's the flower stem. Now, there was some method to the madness. This ABC building here was skinned with a brick called blue indicot, which is a real pretty brick that's kind of got a deep blue-gray color with little kind of fleckings of bronze in it. And these trees were kind of planted to kind of set that off. So anyways, I think what they're doing, if you guys look at the ABC building now, I think they're chipping all those bricks off I think one or two of them came loose and fell, and so they decided to remove all of the bricks. So anyway, now good uses for this tree. It's a small scale tree, and we're always looking for those. You know, 15 to 20 feet tall, it says on this particular slide. But it's from Southern Europe to Central China, grows 12 to 15 feet tall, which would definitely be a small scale tree, and is wide. Roundish leaves, 1.5 to 3 inches. Leaves are bluish green in species and more burgundy in the variety Purpurea. Common name from the dramatic puffs of smoke from the fading flowers. Now, here's the thing to remember. People always are asking about trees that fulfill specific roles. These are known to be deep rooters, and when they're established can be quite drought tolerant, but they're great for holding slopes. And when we're thinking about planting on a slope, one of the biggest mistakes people make is they put a monoculture on the slope, maybe all ice plant or all gazanias or all one thing. But what you should be doing is planting multiple things on a slope with varying depths of their roots to prevent any kind of slope failure with excessive rains. And so when people ask me about a good slope holding tree, this is one of the first go-to trees I go for, because a lot of our communities, if there is a slope and a terracing of the community, it usually means there's a view. And if you have a big old tree holding a slope, it's going to get up there and interrupt the view. But if you have a small scale tree planted on the slope, chances are there won't be that conflict between holding the slope and maintaining a view. Okay. This actually should be, I'm just looking at this now, on your list. It's X Chitalpa taskentensis. And now I have Chitalpa X taskentensis. So the X should probably be in front. So hang on just a second. Okay, I'm going to show you this. These are the two parents. Okay, the X should be in the front. And usually if the X is in front of the genus, it means that they're distantly related. Okay, distantly related. So so hybrids are usually within the same you know, really close, much more closely related. So if you have the X out in front, but anyway, these are the parents of this particular hybrid. It's Catalpa bignonioides and Chalopsis linearis. We've already had Chalopsis linearis. We will probably not have Catalpa bignonioides, but you notice how the name is kind of a cross between the two. So Chitalpa, you know, as they're kind of crossing the names to get to this one. So the one parent has big wide leaves, the other parent has little skinny leaves, and these are the leaves of Chitalpa. Now, the idea was that we were going to provide a plant that had the characteristics of drought tolerance, but a little bit more of a lusher look than the desert willow. So we do have a wider leaf because of one of the parents, but these trees we often see mostly planted in more arid areas, Barstow, and if you were to drive up the Interstate 5 all the way up through the San Joaquin Valley, these are planted a lot at exits where you have gas stations and stuff like that. You see them there an awful lot. So they are rugged. Here are the flowers. So they have a few different varieties, but this, you know, it's usually this trumpet-shaped flower again. In close to the coast, they get a little powdery mildew on the leaves because they're kind of a desert plant, and so we see a little bit of that. And they do go briefly deciduous, but they have a long bloom period, the top and bottom of the leaf. Here you can see the trunk next to a stake and the actual leaf flowers. So we have these in the, I would be taking you out to show you one of the parents. Right next to the desert willow, we have Catalpa, every other one. So you could see the parents. So here we have the name right. So the X is in the front. Cross from outside genus, parent Chalopsis linearis and Catalpa bignonioides grows 20 to 30 feet tall and wide. Great drought tolerant tree planted mainly in the interior valleys of California. Some powdery mildew close to the coast. Gangliform benefits from early shaping. So in our trees, we prune them with our tree care class almost every other year for the first 8 or 9 years. Okay. One of my favorite trees, Brachychiton discolor. I first learned about this tree in taking the trees class, but then I took plant propagation and we propagated a bunch of these trees, and then I showed up to class and all the trees that we had propagated were thrown into a big heap, big trash pile. And as a student, I was alarmed and I said, what's the deal with all the trees being tossed out? And they said, well, we can't take care of all of them. We grew too many. And so I asked if I could take one home. So I took one home, put it in a pot. That was in like 1982. So it's been in a pot ever since. But I love that tree. It's a brachychiton, a big fat trunk. And what I like about it probably the most are the flowers. Everything on this tree is fuzzy. So it has these pink fuzzy flowers. You can kind of pick up on that a little bit. It has leaves that are like maple leaves, kind of a dark green on the top and almost whitish on the underside. The flowers are, every year I always grab a bunch of them up and get all artsy with my camera and try to take pictures of them, but they're very fuzzy and cool to look at. So here they are again. So, one of the things about brachychitons, and this one in particular, is that what it'll do is it'll go briefly deciduous. It'll just drop a bunch of its leaves and then say, all right, flowers. And then it'll re-leaf out. So, it drops its leaves just so that it can show off its flowers, and then it grows them back. But you can see how fuzzy these guys are. And they have pods, the typical pods, but they're not really pods. They're called follicles. Follicles are a pod that only has one seam. Pod would have a seam that went on both sides, but this only has a seam on one side, opens up on one side, so it makes it like a boat. But this is fuzzy, and the stems are a little fuzzy. It's called the Queensland lacebark because it starts to, as it goes from being a green trunk to a gray trunk, it has a kind of a lacy texture to the bark. Here you can see the biggest pods of all the brachychitons that you're going to have on your list. But the main thing is everything's fuzzy on this one. Okay, leaves are fuzzy, flowers are fuzzy, pods are fuzzy. This is one in the arboretum. It's much bigger now. You can see that flower way up there. It can get quite large. they can get up to 100 feet tall in certain areas. The leaves can get 6 inches across. Now I'm just showing you brachychitons that all have unique looking flowers. This is on list 10. We're going to have this one. This is acerifolia. This is populinus, which you've already had, and this is discolor. So you're going to have at least 3 brachychitons. All of them have very unique flowers. This is a park in Australia that's making the little playground equipment look like follicles. Okay, 40 to 60 feet tall and 30 feet wide. Maple-shaped leaves are 6 inches across, green on the top and whitish underneath and fuzzy. Flowers are pink and fuzzy and bell-shaped. Pods or follicles are long to 8 inches, fuzzy as well. Branches drop leaves while flowering. Okay. Euphorbia catinifolia. This is a Caribbean copper plant. Now, I'm looking for my little info sheet, but anyway, this is south of Florida through a lot of the Caribbean islands. This is a euphorbia, which means that it has that white latex. Not necessarily problematic unless you get it in your eyes, which you always want to avoid. Brilliant bronze, purplish bronze leaves on this one. Very attractive plant. It starts out as a shrub. If you want it to be a tree, you have to work with it as it grows. It produces these delicate little clusters of creamy flowers and even these little fruits afterwards that kind of look like little pumpkins. They fall off right away. It's a real attractive tree. We planted them in amongst the pineapple guava, so we'd have gray and bronze. I was always big into grays and bronzes when I used to do a lot of design work, and this one has a real attractive look to it. But if you're going to make this into a tree, the best thing that you would want to do is maybe take 3 1 gallons and plant them, a good foot or so apart into a grouping, so that you wouldn't have the danger of them kind of running into each other, like a forced multi-trunk would, but also to have a much fuller tree. I don't know if I have a picture of a guy that did this. Yeah, see what this guy did? He planted them, looks like they're about 2 feet apart in a triangle. Now this is, I think, on the drive-by list, this tree's there, and it's probably twice the size now, but it's right on the corner, and it's really kind of gives them a little bit of privacy here on their porch, but it's an attractive look. One could do the same by itself, but I've just kind of, I saw this and I've watched it over the last 10 years to see what it's become, and I did the same thing at the horticulture department, and it seemed to work out great. Only problem with the horticulture department was we planted it between the department and the chemistry building, and the Santa Ana winds, when they come through there, come howling through that corridor and have knocked a couple of them over. Okay. So here they are along the side of horticulture. Pineapple guava, are in between. Native to Mexico and South America, the shrub/tree grows 10 to 15 feet tall and wide, sometimes 30 feet. The ones that we have in the horticulture department now are probably pushing 15 to 20 feet tall. Leaves are spade-shaped and 2 to 3 inches long and bronzy purple. White latex, when branches are broke, can be a skin irritant. Cold temperatures and winds cause defoliation, best near the coast. So we have this on our list because of its attractiveness and its small scale and the fact that it does well near the coast. Okay. All right. There's a tree on our list that this could be confused with, and that's the smoke tree. But remember, this is smooth, spade-shaped leaf. The smoke tree is kind of oblong, very crinkly, much more bumpy leaf and mottled color, where this one's just the same color throughout. Okay. All right. So here we are. Let's come back at 10 minutes to 7. What do you say? And then we'll pick up. I'll show you the specimens. Okay. Okay, so I didn't give you good information. Jihad found some recipes connected with the honey mesquite, prosopis, and I think he posted a place where you can go. And I've done better for you guys. I took a desert ecology class, and I should have remembered more of the uses for that tree. But anyway, I appreciate Jihad posting that for us to see. Anyway, so this is the number 92 Prosopis glandulosa maverick, the honey mesquite. You can see the compound leaf here. So these are both leaves that I've pulled. Now these are a little fatter than the ones that you saw on the PowerPoint. And remember, this isn't a raised planter, and it was some pretty rich soil, backfill, and so it's getting a little bit more water than it would typically get in the desert scenario. But so the leaflets are a little fatter, but still no pods or no blossoms right now. But usually if you look at a tree, you can find the remnants, or you can see pods from last year. So anyway, this is the leaves of the honey mesquite. Any questions about this one?
Is there a reason why it's called honey? Is it just something?
It has to do with the flowers have a sap. Oh, hang on, somebody's doing them. The flowers have a sap. I think that's what it is. Is there's like a sweet sap that is attached to the flowers when they're blooming, when they're first sending out their flowers. I think that's what it is. I'm not sure. I'm just kind of guessing. Okay. Let's go on to the next one. Okay, so this is Pinus mugo mugo, the dwarf mugo pine. So we're seeing a female cone that's forming here. So usually when they become woody and they fully form, they're round and not kind of this shape, but you can at least see how big they get. Usually about an inch across, maybe 2 inches at the most. Also, you can see the needles two in a needle sheath here. And it says that the needles can get 2 to 3 inches long. This is probably about an inch to an inch and a half long. One of the interesting things, if you look at our mugo pine in the horticulture department, is it has one section that has needles that look a little different than the other. And we've always tried to figure out what that was all about. Okay. So remember, this is holding close to the ground for a reason, for self-preservation. Keep it the temperature close to the ground where it's warmer, and also to avoid those harsh cold winds. Okay. So this is the deodar cedar, Cedrus deodara, from the Himalayas. This is one of the true cedars. This is a piece from a very young nursery specimen. So this is probably in a 15-gallon can, and I'm recognizing that we don't see a lot of distinctive tufts like this along the branch. We have to kind of, this is more juvenile growth, but this is kind of what we're looking for here, are the leaves all coming from a central point along the stem. And remember, when we're looking at these in the landscape and we're trying to determine whether this is one of 2 commonly seen cedars in our Southern California area, this one always has nodding tips. So the tips are always kind of drooping at the very ends. Also, these needles are about twice as long as Cedrus atlantica. So keep that in mind. It's a much softer look up close. And we'll show the 2 next to each other when we get the next one. It's on list, I think it's on list 10. Okay. So any questions about this one? This is one that can handle drought once it's established. It's can stand up to some pretty abusive conditions. Okay. Macadamia ternifolia, the macadamia nut. You guys, when you want to make sure this is what you're seeing, you always want to look for those undulating edges and the spines towards the petiole of the leaf. And when I was unfurling this, I was saying, gosh, I hope there's at least a few spines. And sure enough, looks like there's 1 spine here and 2 spines on that one. There's a few on each one of these, but the undulating edges are very commonplace on this one. Very leathery, stiff leaf. Okay. So I've seen these as street trees. They're an attractive tree. Have a pretty lush look to them. Any questions about this one?
Can you eat the nut right off of the tree, or does it have to be like roasted?
I think you can dry it and then crack it. It's inside of a really hard shell.
It's really hard. A friend of mine has one of these, and the squirrels crack them open like crazy.
Oh, do they?
Oh, they make a huge mess. But they are, she said that she has to use a special nut cracker for it.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, and I think that they salt them and I think they dry them, the insides, to make them a little more palatable. But yeah, it's hard to, somebody, I have a necklace from when I was in Hawaii a long time ago that had these woven into it was kind of like a lei, but it had these nuts in it. And I just kept it because of the nuts, and the nuts are just perfectly fine long time later. Yeah, so I think they're edible out of the shells. But yeah, they can be messy if you've got squirrels. And I think we all have squirrels now.
Now, is it also true that the nuts take like 8 years to mature or something like that? Because don't they say that's part of the reason that they're so expensive, or is that like a false tale?
Yeah, no, they do take a long time. They stay on the tree for quite some time as they're maturing from being little green to being larger and the right size, and then they, of course, they get woody at the end. Yeah, they're slow growing. Yeah, and I think there's quite a bit of labor involved with obviously cracking them, and the nut inside is not at all hard. It's it's pretty supple, so I'm sure you have to crack them with care to maintain that little guy inside. So. Okay. Syzygium paniculatum, Australian brush cherry. Remember, we see this, and you can see the blossoms that are now turning into little fruits here, and then we've got a fully full-size fruit here. It's very attractive foliage with this shiny growth and the bronze new growth on it. It's a very attractive look. As a tree, a little bit gangly in form, tends to be get kind of tall, and then the branches will flop over a little bit at the end. But it's a dense growing thing, and it's a good screen, good background tree. So it has multiple uses for sure, but 9 times out of 10, this is going to be just a big tall shrub or a big tall hedge. Any questions about this one? Okay. Oftentimes you see these forced into animal shapes and stuff with chicken wire and all kinds of interesting things they do with these guys. Here's another flower, a little bit more intact. Here we go. All right. Where's my little guava? Okay, so Fajoa celowiana or Aca celowiana, pineapple guava. So really dark, shiny on the top. You can see how shiny it is, and then really white and not necessarily fuzzy, but just very, very white on the underside here. So big contrast. So when you look at this tree, it looks like it's gray-green because of this contrasting thing going on here. And then, of course, this is the fruit. We've got about 30 of them sitting out in the kitchen, and I've got some guava preserves. Just to make the picture complete. There it is. All right. So, in the time that I was, doing this as a business, doing design for people and doing installs and all of that, I was a gardener the longest, but I planted one of these trees probably in most of the landscapes that I designed. So it was something that I encouraged them to do. And I probably encouraged them to do it because I knew that I was going to probably end up being their gardener as well. And I knew that I was going to be able to form this bush into a tree. And so it worked out well for me, but I think that this is one of those trees that's probably underused. So anyway, there it is. We don't have the Michelle yet, so we're gonna have to move on. Okay, so Stenocarpus sinuatus, the firewheel tree. Remember, when it's younger, the leaves that are very unique in their shapes. This one has 4 lobes. This one has 5, almost 6 lobes on it. Looks like it's going to be having 7 here pretty soon. So very uniquely shaped leaves. Create a lot of character. This is a potentially even though it can get pretty good size, this would be more of a specimen tree or a patio tree. Wouldn't be hard to keep this size in control, but not necessarily one that would be good for our dry climates. You would have to irrigate this tree for sure. So something to keep in mind. Okay, so top of the leaf and the underside of the leaf are pretty similar. They're both shiny, which is something we don't see very often. And this one, of course, has that very, very interesting looking rotary flower that can come right out of the sides of the trunk of the tree. Okay. Catinus cogigrea, the smoke tree. This is the variety Burgundy. The difference between this and the regular species is that it would be a little bit more kind of blue-green mottled with the Burgundy. So they'd be kind of a modeling color, kind of like how this is mottled here. It'd be a little bit more mottled, but this is the variety Burgundy. Small scale tree, and 25 feet, anything that goes underneath 25 feet is a small scale tree. And I think that its drought tolerance and its ability to hold slopes with a deep root system makes it one of the most useful trees out there for having that job, that role to fill. I have many times had to go out and see terraced places like East Bluff, where they have a terrace and then a street down below and then a street down below. And they all have trees planted on their slopes, and a lot of the trees have been kind of topped to keep the views intact. Okay, so that's, and you can see the stems from the old bloom here. See if I can pop this off and you can get a little bit better idea what they look like. Here they are. So they persist on there for a full year. And so each of these stems would have its own little kind of almost a feathery looking cluster of flowers on it, which gives it that kind of almost like smoke, very, very fine texture, like cotton candy. Okay. X. Catalpa taskentensis is the Catalpa tree, a drought-tolerant tree from its genetics from the desert willow, which is a tree that's all over the Southwest. Made a little bit lusher by its other cross, which is the Catalpa, which has the big leaves. So this is kind of a slightly in between. It's got the bignoniaceae flowers on it, though, trumpet-shaped flowers. And this one, you can see there's a little bit of powdery mildew on these leaves from its proximity to the coast. So this would be more of it'll look fine. It's just, I kind of consider this to be not a really good up-close tree, more of a distance tree, a place. I would be planting this in a place where it was going to be far from regular lawns and things like that were getting lots and lots of water. Okay. Any questions about this tree? Okay. Okay. Cagilia africana, the sausage tree. Probably one of the stiffest, most leathery compound leaves or leaves. Listen, I'm going to put this up against, I'm going to rub this leaf against the microphone. Listen. You guys hear that? Okay, so it's just very, 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 very leathery and very stiff. And this is a drought deciduous tree. If it has regular water, it's going to keep its leaves on all the time. If it gets deprived of water, it's going to drop its leaves, but still be just as a conservation measure. And the thickness and the intense cuticle on this leaf, I can tell that it's just designed to keep it from losing too much moisture. So the pendulous flowers that come out of this are pretty striking. They all kind of sweep upward and are spaced quite a distance apart, hanging on a big, long, pendulous chain or stalk. They say that the flowers can get up to 10 feet long as they hang down, about an inch or two in between each flower as it radiates around the stem. So kind of an interesting, ours, there's only maybe a stem that hangs down about a foot, and then it's probably got about 6 or 8 flowers on it. So anyways, an interesting tree, conversation tree for sure. It's on the list because of its ability to be water conservative. Obviously, if you deprive it for a long time, it's going to drop its leaves and people are going to wonder what's going on, but that's just a self-protection mechanism. So, and it's got some interesting characteristics. The blooms and the sausages are obviously pretty cool. Called a woody berry. Okay. Okay. Brachychiton discolor, the Queensland lace bark. Like all brachychitons, has a fat, stout trunk, a water holding trunk that is green early on and then gets kind of calloused over with kind of a gray, barky, smooth bark on it, that as it's starting to kind of fill in, it looks very delicate, like lace spreading across a green stem. This is the one that has everything on it is fuzzy. The leaves, if you were to feel these leaves on the bottom side, there's actual fuzz on these leaves. I don't know if we can pick it up or not. Flowers, of course, are very fuzzy. And then this follicle is extremely fuzzy as well. So lots of interesting characteristics to this tree. Okay. I think that we should be seeing a lot more brachychitons around. I think they're a good tree for our area. They're good for holding on to or using less water and have lots of character to them. Any questions about this one? Okay. You see the inside the flower there.
I have a question. So sometimes we talk like in design about palettes and like where would this fit Like between like a woodland palette or a tropical palette, like where would it fit? In what kind of palette?
You know, I don't think it has it tends to look a little bit more tropical than it does woodland or anything like that. It's brachychitons kind of stand alone in their character anyways. But you know, they're where they come from, it's pretty barren. You know, a lot of the areas where we find brachychitons are pretty barren and not super lush. So, you know, I think that this would be, most of the brachychitons could find their way into a water conservation garden, and would look fine with, just because of their character as single. Mass planting would be cool too. You know, we planted them at OCC. We planted a bunch of brachychiton rupestris in a big line, and they look really cool. But as far as palettes go, or as far as, you know, what would this match up well with? It's got this maple leaf, which is really rare. A lot of brachychitons have leaves that are much different. So I just couldn't really, I really couldn't tell you. I just would say that it would be more of a specimen tree.
So when you say like it would do really well in our California landscapes.
Oh yeah.
I think about like, okay, so what other plants would I pair it with for it to not look out of place? And
well, as far as out of place though, you know, I mean, if you're a purist and if you are taking a California native role, then that's one way. If you're a California friendly designer and you're working from Mediterranean climates from all over the world, this would fit in there just beautifully into that scenario. And you know what we're looking for in trees, like when we start moving into a succulent garden and stuff like that, we're looking at character of the trees, of the plants themselves, kind of creating their own whimsy. You know what I mean? Like with succulent gardens, you can do an undersea garden because a lot of the aloes and stuff have these kind of octopusy looking rolls to them. So I think that there's a lot of character that kind of stands alone and would probably find its way into a landscape as a specimen, and something that a conversation piece. People would be, gosh, I haven't seen many of those around. What's that? So anyway, I don't think I'm answering your question too well, but I think in the world of design, I think that your burden falls mostly with making sure that you're planning things that are going to do well with the same watering regime and the same exposure and the same soil and those kinds of things. And then let the character kind of come through on some of this stuff because it doesn't usually fall into one slot. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, this is Euphorbia catinifolia. This is the Caribbean copper plant. We've got some good examples of the leaves here, which have red stems. And look, I just pulled a leaf off and you can see that white latex coming out. So this would be something you'd want to be careful of as far as getting it on your skin and stuff like that. If you're pruning these, you definitely would have gloves on. And these flowers kind of are producing these little fruits that are kind of in a triangular, 3 little lobes on one fruit here. They're kind of interesting looking. Now I brought, we've got a leaf here And then I'm going to kind of compare it to the smoke tree. So here's the copper plant, and here's the smoke tree. So these are much more consistent in their coloring. These are more mottled. Okay. Top and bottom. So here's the top and bottom of the copper plant right here. Here's the top and bottom of the smoke tree. So the bottom is maroon. The top is kind of a green maroon combo here. And of course, the top on the smoke tree is a kind of a mottled maroon and blue green. And then the bottom is a much lighter color. And of course, stems are red here. Red stems, branches are even reddish. It's not until the stems are a few years old that they get a kind of a barkiness to them. Okay. Any questions about this one? Okay, I'm going to pull one more up from last week. Okay, so what we have here is one from last week called Serotonia siliqua, the carob tree. You guys remember that from last week's list? We kind of bounced over that one. We didn't have it on the PowerPoint or I didn't have a specimen to show you. We used to have at OCC, we used to have this, and I'm sorry that I keep talking about what we used to have, but with all the development that we've had over the last 5 to 10 years, we've lost so many trees. But this is a monoecious plant, which means that it's either male or female. It has one home for its male flowers and one home for its female flowers. And this is a Mediterranean tree. What I don't have for you is the pod. It's in the Fabaceae family, and the pod is kind of curved and about 5 to 6 inches long. And it's kind of always described the pod as being greasy. It always looks like it has a shininess, like it's oily. And of course, the seeds inside the pod are used for a kind of a chocolate replacement carob that we've known for quite a while. The leaves on this are very kind of stiff and sometimes I think of them as being kind of a gray green, although these are showing up as more of a deep green and a little bit lighter on the underside. One of the things that about carob trees is that the females, which make the pods, have female flowers on them, which are very interesting to look at. The males have male flowers, and the flowers can come right out of the stems, right out of the bigger branches. And then what we used to have at OCC was we had a row of about 9 of these trees, all in a row. Some were male, some were female, and there was even a hermaphrodite in there that was half male, half female. And so what we would do is we would talk about the tree, and we would talk about the characteristics of the male versus the female. And then we would walk down the row, and I would let the class figure it out, as we went from tree to tree. And it proved to be a really good exercise in studying a tree that has male and female standalone trees, and then looking closely at the flowers as well. So anyway, I bring it up because one of the things about carob trees that is their downfall, and I told you that there were two, a male and a female, right on 20th Street, just not too far from where my house is, and they got torn out and replaced with one spindly little queen palm. And the male flowers smell, they don't smell great. And in fact, once you've smelled a male flower carob tree, you'll recognize it. And there have been many times since I first took trees a long time ago that I'll be walking down a street and I'll smell that smell and I'll instantly know that there should be a male carob tree around. And sure enough, I'll look and maybe I've just walked under it or it's across the street or whatever, but it's something that will follow you everywhere. Now, if you guys were to take the walk into UCI, and if you were to go straight across that bridge that kind of winds up and goes over the top of Campus Drive and then drops you into UCI, and you were to walk straight to Aldrich Park, you would pass Pinus Pinea, and then you'd go up some steps into a kind of a raised patio, and there would be carobs, and there would be male and female, and you'd walk past probably about 15 or 20 carob trees. And then drop down into Aldrich Park where you'd find lots of trees that were on last week's list. So anyway, it's something to know about carobs. They're an interesting tree. They're a Mediterranean tree. They handle our water regime that we have. But I think people take them out because of the male flowers smelling a little off. So anyway. Okay. Questions for me, you guys? Any questions? It's only 7:30. My God, we just went right through that one. Let's see. Make sure we remember about our field trip, which is on Saturday, November 20th in Claremont, California. So that's about an hour away, about 45 minutes on a Saturday. So I'll give you guys directions, exactly where we're going to be, what to look for, how to find me, all of that stuff as we get closer. But this will be the only chance we have to see each other. Maybe we'll be alarmed and want to all get back in our cars and go home. But I think it's something we should try to do if we can. And also going to the Huntington is always a big deal anyway. So any questions, you guys? Okay. All right. If there's no questions, I'll let you guys go, and we'll see you back here in a week's time. And stay happy and healthy.
Thanks, Rick.
All right, guys.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye.